Unconditional love. Does it really exist? Let's go ahead and have a softball conversation for the last day of the month there, Danielle. Hey, everyone, good day to you guys. Thank you for joining us for another rare conversation with myself, Tony, and Danielle Jalen. Every Tuesday, 12:01 p.m. For 30 minutes is a time to time out to reflect, inspect, redirect areas that we need to go ahead and do so to live a better life. And during these conversations, we share a lot of our life experiences, things that we've learned over the gosh, we've now been together for 22 years, and things we've had a chance to learn from mentors, coaches, trainings that we've done. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of unconditional love. Does it really exist? I started to look at science, Danielle. There's tons of different definitions when it comes to unconditional love. Basically, in a nutshell, if I was to sum it up, layman's terms, it is love without strings.
Yeah,
Is that how you would define it? How else would you define it?
I think that's exactly what it means. There's no conditions for what love you can give.
Right? So I think, when a lot of us grew up like listening to like love songs, I mean, think about the 80s, like, I want to know what love is. All the romance attached to it. Um, but it maybe some of you may have, who are watching here today, you may not have been in a relationship where unconditional love is a major player. So you might be wondering, what does it mean to love someone unconditionally? And as a leader, whether personally or professionally, it's a good idea to look at it. And what is that even supposed to look like? We might actually have you on this. And the truth is, unconditional love has a lot of layers. Shrek, I think, would argue that it resembles an onion or an ogre for that. And we can all say that, hey, relationships aren't easy. There's a reason why it says real, right? Because you sometimes got to get really real, and there can be a lot to consider when difficult and even strenuous situations pop up. And sometimes when this happens, the unconditionalness can start to feel more like an obligation rather than a selfless act of kindness. So let's go ahead and break it down of probably where does it start?
Well, I think unconditional love starts with yourself. I think that a lot of the times that if we can actually look ourselves in the mirror, in the eyes, and look at what that looks like, I think we love ourselves with conditions a lot of the times. If I was 20 pounds lighter, I would love myself more. If I was top salesperson, I would love myself more. And I think it starts with us, like we set conditions on what it means to love ourselves.
You make a very interesting point there. You know, I love myself, but way differently. I love myself, but I did this more. Why do you think we do that? Like, because we talk about unconditional love, so it's really conditional love is when you think about it. Why do you think we start with that?
Well, I think once we like can look at ourselves and be happy with ourselves, I think it's hard if we're not happy with ourselves, how can we be happy with those around us? And if we're looking to those around us to make us happy or feel loved, then I think we're just stuck in this vicious circle because I'd love you more if you loved me more instead of just being like, hey, I just love you. Like it is what it is. Whatever happens, we're all human. And understanding with ourselves that it's not perfection, it's progress.
Hmm. Hmm. So are you saying that in order to have unconditional love, even to entertain the idea of it, we've got to start with ourselves?
I think a lot of it has to start with ourselves. I don't know that we can truly unconditionally love somebody else if we're not giving ourselves that same grace and room to grow.
So where do you start with that then? Like I think I mean it sounds good, but where have you learned how to start with it? Because I mean, one is having an awareness of it, right?
I think having awareness, I think a lot of it Two stems from like, if we're frustrated with somebody else, like, oh, they're always late. Well, are you late? Like, what are you putting out there for yourself? Are we upset with that person, or are we upset with ourselves because we fell short in an area?
So are you saying one of the ways, steps that you've learned how to go ahead and learn more kind of unconditional love with yourself is when you're getting upset with others about things, you learn how to go ahead and look at yourself first versus pointing the finger at the other person?
Yeah, I think it's self-inspection, like looking inward and what's really causing that frustration if you're frustrated, or unhappiness if you're unhappy. Like, I think a lot of it we try to put on other people to meet those conditions to help us feel a certain way. And in reality, I think it just needs to start within.
Mm. So when we talk about that self-reflection, like how have you learned to not be triggered so much with others?
I don't know that I have completely done that.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's just being aware that, sometimes just like understanding that the things that are upsetting us might not be what's upsetting us. It could be just us.
Mm. Yeah, going a little deeper on that.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so number one, you say he believes it starts with your own self-love, right? And are the things that you are getting frustrated with others, is it something that you might be getting more frustrated with yourself on? What other things, like, I mean, by guys, I just want to let y'all know watching this, we have not, at least I haven't figured it out. Maybe Danielle's may have figured it out. I have not figured it out, you know. I'm not Jesus. Yeah, I got a long ways to go. I mean, thinking about that. It gives us something to work towards. You say self-love. So I think in order that for that also to happen, you've got to let go of things too, don't you?
Yeah, I think that I don't know what you, but for me, I think there's been years of beating yourself up over things that you haven't accomplished or where you've fallen short or different things that have happened, and just understanding that those continue to build up upon each other. And that we talk about that little voice that talks to you in your head, like, how are you talking to yourself? And understanding, like, are you building yourself up, or are you constantly criticizing and putting yourself down for not doing something? And understanding like that continues to build up and eventually could be the reason that you're not moving forward and hitting some of your goals is because you've allowed those things to build a wall, and now you need to like work through some of that and understand, like, accept it and let it go. Like, it is what it is at this point. And I think to be able to move forward, you have to let some of that stuff go instead of allowing you to hold you back.
Mm. So is that like what you're saying? You someone just gotta like um forgive yourself.
Yeah.
So forgiveness again sometimes can be easier said than done. How do you know if it's something that you got to forgive yourself on?
I don't know.
Because I mean, think about, okay, yeah, you know, like, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is like something that you might be moving, not be moving forward in a certain thing. It could be your health, it could be your relationships, it could be your job. And what I'm hearing you say is it's because maybe you're holding on to something. And I think sometimes it's because we hold on to things to protect us from that fear of failure.
Yeah.
Okay. So unconditional love, you got to, what you're saying is first you got to get a, like, are you being critical of others? I think a lot of it. Like, I think there's signs of it, right? For unconditional love, it begins with self love. You got to ask yourself, okay, am I being critical of others? Is there things that you've been holding on to that you simply just got to forgive yourself and let go of it? Okay, so you get do that assessment, what are some other things that you learn when it comes to creating unconditional love for yourself?
Well, I think how you take care of yourself. I think if you're not taking care of yourself, it's hard to care for others and to be there for others. It's no different than the little different buckets in your life that you need to continue to fill. And if you give too much, you're going to run empty. And so making sure that you're taking care of yourself in the proper ways that are going to allow that to happen.
Right. And that's like, I mean, we're like a plant, right? If we don't take care of the plant does die. And I think another thing when you look at like unconditional love, I mean, I think you got to start with you. Um, I think another thing when it comes to unconditional love, it's means that you have to you not have an ulterior motive or unspoken expectation or obligation from the for the other person. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you're giving from a place of caring, then there really shouldn't be an expectation to receive anything back
Mhm.
from that person.
I mean, the thing is too, it's pretty like I don't know, fulfilling of the bucket. Like when you just genuinely want to love. Like, love isn't just a feeling; it's something that you've got to do, and that's pretty incredible when you think about it. It's like actually one of the best gifts that you can give another person. When you're able to reciprocate no strings attached love. How about this, where partners support each other in terms of unconditional love? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think it's just encouraging, like for you and I, like I think it's encouraging you to go for the things that are going to fill your bucket. Like I think that it's um just being supportive in a way that isn't necessarily I don't even know. Like I don't know how to explain that. Like I'm supporting you in from a place of just being able to encourage you to grow into your best person, like not somebody that I think that you should be.
Now, that's interesting thought right there. Loving someone not that they think they should be, but loving them as they are. How does how do you go ahead and like when you see someone that you believe that they can do so much more versus looking at their inadequacies, their shortcomings. How have you learned how to balance it between the two? Because that's just like you want someone that hey, they can do this, and you're encouraging, you're loving on them, but you said like how to love them as them. Like, how do you distinguish between the two?
Well, I think it's again, it kind of goes back to like it's not perfection. We're all human, and not everything's going to be perfect. In a perfect world, we're all imperfect. It's understanding that you may be doing your best for that day, no different than yourself. Like that's just the best that you can do for that day, and it is what it is. Like every day is going to be different, and understanding like you personally go through those things, people around you are also going to have those experiences and feelings, and it is what it is for their day. And just being there to support them and say, hey, I understand, like it might not have been your best performance, but you gave your all for that day. And if you feel good about that, that's what matters. If you left something on the table and you think that, you still have to love them, encourage them, and use it as a lesson, and not because we're very, very good at beating ourselves up and being our biggest critics on ourselves. And they don't need that on top of it.
Right. I think another thing is too is that I mean tough times are going to happen, whether at work or at home, and it's only natural for relationships to hit rough patches. Like you said, no one is perfect. And no one has a perfect relationship, regardless of what you see on Instagram and Facebook. All right. And no one has a perfect relationship. It might be close, but we're all bound to have a disagreement every once in a while where, forgiveness, kindness, listening skills, and calm communication are major players when it comes to working through rough spots. What would you say are some keys then so that everyone in a relationship can almost like, tap into, or techniques when tough times do happen to share that unconditional love with someone else?
Well, it's like knowing that, letting them know that you are there for them. Um, letting them know, like, hey, it's okay to have a bad time right now, like to be upset or whatever it is, like allowing them the space to have the feelings that they need to have. And then just letting them know that you're there. I think as far as like a relationship, uh, for us as a marriage, like, yeah, there were different times that we were on the battleship versus the cruise ship. And, just understanding like we had a commitment that whatever it was, we were going to find a way to work through it. And I think when you can approach it like that and there isn't a back door, you figure out ways to make it better.
Right. Because I think so many times that we focus so much on the problem, we give so much energy to the problem versus, okay, like, okay, the problem has happened, the tough time happened. How do we work through this together? Like, to remember that you're on the same side of the net,
Mhm.
right? The problem isn't, you or your significant other or your coworker. The problem is the problem, right? And to understand, okay, what was the cause of it, and what are some ways to work through it. Um, I think another thing is that, when it comes to unconditional love, like once you've learned that self love and giving yourself that, um, I think also about providing security for one another. Because I've learned, like with unconditional love, there's no fear or sense of uncertainty. It's secure, kind, and loving. What I've learned is that sometimes, too, is that you got to share what's on your heart and understand that the receiving party may not like it. But I think if you hold it back and you don't say something, and it's like it just starts to become this downward spiral and it becomes the story, which when you bring that story from in our minds to reality, it may not have really any teeth around it. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because sometimes we want to hesitate and not say anything.
I think you have to understand, like, is it something that's going to help the situation or just add fuel to the fire? Like, if it's truly something that's going to contribute and clear the air, then yes, you need to talk about it. If it's just something that you just want to whine and complain about, then is it something that's truly going to help, or is it just because you want to complain and be upset? Like, I think there's a difference in them. Where is it a you problem or is it an us problem?
Mm. Dive into that further. The you problem versus the us problem. Because sometimes I feel that my problems are your problems.
Well, I think that it's one of those things where you have to look at yourself and like, am I truly upset with the other person? This is something we need to fix, or is this something that I'm not happy with because I fell short somewhere and I just want to blame somebody?
That takes a big person to do that. That takes courage to do that. To not um, extend the blame to somebody else. It's sort of like the situation when, I mean, I think we've all gone through this. Well, you don't call me no more. Or you don't do that no more. Like, you have a phone. Like, why does it just have to be me? But why don't people just take that responsibility? Because I think part of unconditional love is taking that responsibility upon ourselves too.
Well, I think it's everyone's at a different place to be able to recognize that. I don't think that it's a one size fits all every single time. I think
No.
that we're all at different places and can recognize those things, um, and just continue to grow from it.
I think another thing in terms of like giving unconditional love is where partners honor requests without compromising themselves. I think that's like a point to really to emphasize, because I think loving someone unconditionally does not mean that you can't have boundaries. Thoughts?
Right. I don't think that you should be a floor mat or a walking mat for somebody just to pounce on. I think that it's okay to have boundaries and be respectful of person's feelings and thoughts and um, where they're at. I don't think that that's at all unacceptable.
Right. I think the person, or people, you love, they can ask for help, but you're not obligated to help or agree to their request if it goes against your needs, your boundaries, and your morals. And I don't think you should expect anyone to compromise themselves to help you, right? And where unconditional love can still be considered unconditional love when boundaries are included. And I think the thing is you got to communicate it, right? Um, I think it's easy to look at unconditional love, but I think there's also the flip side of the coin. Un, I think there's unhealthy forms you got to watch out for. I
Share.
think sure. I think if it comes with limits. So loving without boundaries. Okay, here's what I mean. It can lead to serious issues like being unhappy and taking advantage of, like you said, that floor mat. You're not meant to overlook the hurt and pain that another person causes, and I think it's not healthy um, and totally unfair to the other person if you don't like talk about like. I don't know, I'm trying. You understand what I'm trying to say on that, or did I lose you on that?
I think you're possibly saying like you can't just go and totally be a complete jerk to somebody and just expect them to be like, "Oh, I still love you no matter what." Like there's certain boundaries of how you're being treated
Mhm.
that constitute for you to be able to say, "You know what? I don't appreciate the tone that you're using with me or how you're talking to me or the way that you've been treating me. There's one thing to be upset about something and we can talk about it, but there's a whole nother level of disrespect, I think, that should not be overlooked. And yes, you can love that person outside of that, but it's you still have to understand that there's nothing's ever called for to be treated rudely or disrespectfully or in anything like that.
And that's when people say, "Well, I'm just being authentic." You don't have to be a jerk to be authentic, right? I think some examples of conditional love is when someone says, "I did everything for you, and all you've done is disappoint me," or saying something like this: "This is the things I get after everything I've given you." I mean, I think those are examples of unconditional love. What would you say?
Of conditional love.
Yeah,
Mhm.
or some other examples you would cite for conditional love?
I think those are big examples of what we see. Like, I give all this for you, and I think when you start putting like scorecards on what you've done, takes away from the unconditionalness of it.
Mhm. Or how about this? My boss only talks to me when I'm doing well. That's the boss. They can do that, right? Um, um, Another example I think of a conditional love was my partner is upset with me because I want to become a musician instead of staying at my office job. That's a tough one, you know, because I think people want to pursue their different goals and dreams. I think in life, we want to have two things when it comes to love. We want to find someone to love, and find something that we do that we love. How does that balance out?
If it's meant to be, it will be.
Um, I think another example of conditional love is someone says, "I get chastised if my opinions are even a little different from theirs.
Well, and I think that, again, that comes down to a you problem or an us problem. Like, are you respecting their opinions, or are you battling back about things that they talk about too? Like, I think that it's what we focus on.
Hmm.
You know, if you feel like your boss only talks to you when you're doing well, maybe he's been talking to you when you're not doing well to try to get you to do well. Are you listening the whole time? Like, you know, there's different things like, and that's where I feel like unconditional love starts with us. Like, I think it's a me problem, not always the other person.
Yeah, that takes growing.
Yep.
And I think too is that when a person just, you got to get honest with yourself of where you're at with things, like not with the other person. And I think it's too is like we a lot of times will say, well, I'm not feeling this or I'm not feeling that. Well, remember, feelings aren't facts, but yet you're still supposed to feel as a human being. And I like to ask myself, like, what evidence do I have of that? Like, is that 100% true all the time? Like when we say words like
Mhm.
all the time, never, always, those are emotional response words because they're not 100% true all the time. I think what we can talk about next week too is loving unconditionally with some boundaries and being clear with our expectations on things, and we'll talk more about that here next week. So I think the first thing is the question we talked about at the beginning: unconditional love, does it really exist, Danielle?
It really exists in our perfect world within our mind, in the imperfect world that we live in. No, it does exist. It takes work to make it exist. I don't think that's something that can be overlooked. I think that when we start to realize that we are just human and that our goal should be progress, not perfection, I think that's where we can start to truly tap into that unconditional love and understand that I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to fail at some things. I'm not going to be the perfect spouse. I'm not going to be the perfect mom. I'm not going to be the perfect sister-in-law or whatever it is. Like, I'm not going to be that perfect person, but yet I can still work to be progressing in those areas.
Right. And I think it's important when people hear that, don't say I'm not perfect as a reason for you not to do something. 'Cause I feel that sometimes happens with people. It's like, oh, I'm not this. I'm not like, okay, whoa, 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 whoa. Time out. Are you saying that because you're going to grow, or you're using that as a built-in protector excuse for the reason why you're not doing it? And I have it actually written down on one of my reminders is done is better than perfect. It's on my screen. Done is better than perfect. And clarity comes from action, not thought. And I'll leave you guys with that thought. So we'll be back next Tuesday, 12:01 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we're going to be just talking about, you know, how other ways to love unconditionally. We're going to talk about being transparent about your expectations, learning to listen, and communicating in a non-defensive way. So, until then, if you felt value out of our conversation today, please do share this with others. Invite others to the Rare Leaders community. And our goal is to really connect, collaborate, and contribute to the world, make it the world a better place. Until then, I'm Tony Jalen with the wonderful
Danielle Jalen.
Onward Up.